Cheeseheads. Get on your feet. It's Curd. Cheeseheads. Get on your feet. It's Curd and Long. Hosted by Sparky, Fifer, and Ryan Horvath.
Welcome in another edition of Curd and Long. Steve Sparky Fifer along with our guy Chad Reuter of NFL.com. Thank you for joining us here. Ryan Horvath is off. He was having some issues with his car, so forth. Big, long story. But if you know Horvath, you know he has a dark cloud that follows over him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is it's kind of sad. I'll be honest, it's kind of sad. It bums me out a little bit. He's always got stuff going wrong in his life. It drives me nuts. He is Chad Reuter. He is a ray of sunshine. Follow him on Twitter at Chad_Reuter. And we will get into some draft conversation like always with Chad. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about this Packers-Vikings game and confident, concerned, and curious like we always do. But before we do that, I want to talk about the two quarterbacks in this game. Chad, haven't really talked to you that much during the season. Your thoughts on Jordan Love and what you've seen so far this season and his young surrounding cast that he's been working with?
Yeah, it's about what I've expected. I mean, Jordan has grown over the course of the year with the experience. You need at least 16 to 20 starts before you can really judge a guy. And so he's, getting there and we'll see, how next year goes for him. But I think he's done what he's needed to do. I don't think he was given a 4 aces in terms of his surrounding cast just because of the lack of experience. And, those guys have grown a little bit when they've been healthy. So overall, I think he's done all right. I think issues on the other side of the ball has really cost him more wins than he's gotten more losses than he deserves. So overall, just fine. He's got the talent. He'll grow with the group around him. And I think they'll give him another shot next year to see what he can do.
There's a lot of talk of Luke Musgrave coming out of the draft and him being a difference maker at tight end. And I think Tucker Kraft got pigeonholed by fans and analysts of being, that blocking tight end, that'll get you a few yards here or there. And now people have seen Tucker Kraft these last few weeks. And I think people are taken aback by just how good he really is. Your thoughts on Kraft, I guess, coming out of school versus where he was drafted and so forth?
Well, I thought he could have been a second-round pick. I think he's a good receiver. I mean, he's sort of that Mark Andrews guy that's not a super athlete when he was coming out, bigger body guy, but he's a reliable guy. He's a reliable receiver, and I think he will be a resolute presence over the next few years for the team. And I think he'll be better than what people expected.
Am I crazy to say this whole Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez, Patriots dual tight end thing was dangerous and hard to guard? And now you look at Musgrave and Kraft. I mean, I don't know of another dual tight end team that have these two type of players at the tight end position, maybe since the Patriots.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is what they hope it becomes, a 2 tight end kind of system, because both of them can block on the move as well as inline. And again, when they pick them, that's what they were going for. And again, I thought Kraft could have been picked earlier than he was. So I think that's a legitimate thought process on what even the Lions, when they have Laporta and Brock Wright and guys like that, they make that work too. So I think that's a legitimate thought process for what this team could their defense or their offense could go around in the future. And that, look, when you've got a young guy like Love running it, you need reliable safety nets at tight end and a slot receiver that you don't have to go deep all the time. And I think if Hargrave was healthy for this game, I think that would have given them a much higher chance of winning. Are we frozen?
Chad, I got you.
Yeah. Now I gotcha. You're frozen on my end.
What a mess.
Oh.
Chad, you got me now?
I do.
All right, let's try this again. Internet issues over here at the radio station. All right, we'll continue on from where we
Okay.
were. I'll just edit this together later. Okay,
Okay.
so what about the wide receiver? What about the wide receiving core? As far as Christian Watson, I think coming into the season was supposed to be that number one guy. And then obviously he can't stay healthy yet again this year. And I've seen some fans going, maybe Wicks can be that one guy. Other fans go, well, yeah, Jaden Reed isn't a gigantic human being necessarily, but maybe he's more along those lines of being a true number one wide receiver for this team. How do you look at this wide receiving core? And having said that, do you think there's a chance where they go wide receiver early again this year?
No, I what I think is they have a bunch of guys who are a bunch of 1Bs and 2As that are a core, a true receiving core when they're healthy. And they don't have a true 1A. And I think my guess is that they're not going to draft that early in this draft. I don't know that that guy will be there for them anyway early. And if they could use their cap, if they have the cap space to go get a veteran that's a legitimate guy or a trade, then they would have to do that. But my guess is that they'll let the guys that they have grow into a really strong core. And you can get big plays out of Watson. You could get some big plays out of Wicks and Reed. And you don't need, that big number one guy unless you can get a veteran for a good price through trade. So that's my guess on how they'll do it. And I think they could be just fine with the guys they have and adding a veteran of some sort, even if it's not a 1A guy. And I think they can. The offense will be just fine if they can keep the guys that they have healthy.
Talk with Chad Reuter of NFL.com, draft analyst over there. All right, let's get into Packers-Vikings. Confident, concerned, and curious. Chad, what are you confident about in this Packers team as they head into Sunday night football, New Year's Eve night against the Vikings?
Yeah, not much, honestly. I have some confidence in a lot of things, but not a lot of confidence in anything. But I think Jaden Reed's going to score a touchdown. That's the one thing. That's the thing that they can do against the Vikings defense. They can score. Jaden Reed's going to score a touchdown for him, and everything else is sort of the Vikings are pretty good against running backs, so I'm not sure if Aaron Jones is going to go off. Tight ends, they did a great job on Sam Laporta last week. So I almost went with Tucker Kraft scoring this week, but Vikings did pretty well. Josh Metellus against Kraft might be a difficult call. So I think Jaden Reed will get his 100 yards. He will get a touchdown, and it's just a matter of what else they can muster around him against the Vikings defense.
It's going to be fun because this is another opportunity to where you have Jordan Love seeing a team for a second time. Right. And every time we get Jordan Love against a team for a second time, I feel a lot better about the situation. I feel a lot better about Matt LaFleur getting to coach against the same defense a second time with this group of personnel that he has. When you face guys for the third, fourth, fifth, sixth time, and you've got, Cobb and Lazard and Rodgers, it's not that big of a deal. But when you're playing with all these young guys who maybe you didn't know nearly as well in the beginning of the year, like now, guys like Bo Melton all of a sudden are playing for this team and so forth.
Yeah,
I feel pretty good going into this game as far as that this offense is going to be able to score some points against the Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, seeing what they did against Detroit last week, I think they played very well for a while, and then Detroit is just a better team, so they came back. And I think Green Bay may be a better team, but I'm not as confident as I would have been with the Lions making that comeback last week. So I think it'll be a tight game. I think I teams are very similar, but in terms of one thing that's going to really stand out and that I'm confident is going to happen, there's not a lot. I think it's going to be a tough game, but I think Jaden Reed has proven himself, you work them inside, you work them outside against a Vikings defense that will give up some, points against receivers. So that's the one thing I think is going to happen for sure in this game.
All right. So what about concerns then heading into this game against the Vikings? Again, no Jair Alexander in this game. You've got a new lead running back in Minnesota with Ty Chandler, who's come onto the scene here these last couple of weeks. The Packers' inability to stop the run is always a thing too. What are you concerned about this week? Maybe there's multiple things you're concerned about.
Well, I think if we had an hour podcast, I can get through them all. But I think the main thing is the Justin Jefferson factor. Without Alexander in the game last year, he went off, early in the season against the Packers, and then he had one catch for 15 yards in the late game, the January 1st game last year. I think we're going to see a lot more than one catch for 15 yards in this game. Packers secondary has not been good. The other thing I could have said I'm confident about is that Packer fans will not be clamoring for a Joe Barry contract extension after this game. So that is the other thing I'm confident in. But I think Justin Jefferson's going to score a lot of points, or he's going to make a lot of catches. They just have to keep him out of the end zone. Okay, so he's going to get 8 catches for 140 yards or something like that. He's going to score once, but you can't let him go off for 2 or 3 touchdowns. And I think that's the thing that's concerning about this game. A good receiver like that without Alexander, with some good corners, the guys that can make some plays, but not great corners, and not pass rush hasn't been exceptional. So that's the thing I'm most concerned about in this game.
I'm concerned about this Vikings running game because I think what's going to happen, and maybe I'm wrong, but they're going to put all kinds of extra attention on Jefferson with a safety corner, and they're going to try and take him out of the game as much as possible.
Yeah.
While focusing all of that, then they may lose track of this running game. And, if Ty Chandler runs for $125, $130, I don't think the Packers can win this football game.
Yeah.
If he's running the football and you're also having issues with Justin Jefferson at the same time. I think Jefferson has a big game, but you control the run and make them more one-dimensional. I think you got a better chance of success versus if both of them get off the ground and running at the same time, Chad.
Well, I'm also concerned about the run, but when we get into the next category, I'll get into that because I'm very curious about one aspect of their run game that the Packers have had trouble with that could be an issue this weekend.
That would be the quarterback Hall, the 5th round pick out of BYU. I'm also curious about this as far as what he looks like. Look, he's had a handful of snaps. He hasn't had a full game. He hasn't had a legitimate start yet at this point. So if we had a better defensive coordinator, I'd feel confident that we could confuse him a little bit, show him stuff he hasn't seen. Right. But that's not what's going to happen. Our defense believes in allowing the quarterback to play pitch and catch down the field. So from that aspect, it'll be like a 7-on-7 drill for him. But as you pointed out, the ability for him to get out and run has provided big issues for the Packers.
Yeah, and look, he came in and he got hurt the one start he had, and I think he was like 5 for 6 for 70. I mean, he was playing well before he got hurt, and I think he's an efficient thrower. And I liked him coming out of BYU. I thought it was a great pick for them in the 5th round, honestly. In terms of whether he's going to be a career backup or starter, we're not sure about that, but he's going to play in the league for a while because he does have that dual threat. And if the Packers play man defense against him, he is going to look at one target. He might look at 2 targets, and then he's taken off. And if everybody's got his back to him, he can run for 40, 50, 60 yards in this game if they're not careful. So I think he's going to make some throws to Jefferson. And Jefferson, as long as they're in his area code, he's going to make them. And I think he's going to run for 40 or 50 yards potentially in this game. Again, it just comes down to whether you keep them out of the end zone or not at the end of the game. And so that what Hall does is the most curious. And by the way, if he's not playing well, they're probably going to bring in Dobbs if he's healthy, and he will run against the Packers too. So if either of those guys are in there, they could make the Packers really hurt. And especially if Slayton is hurt and is not playing well in the middle of the defense, that's what I'm very curious about to see what's going to happen.
I'm curious to see how many points the Packers are going to need to score to win this game. I mean, it took them 33 against an absolute craptastic Carolina Panthers offense to beat them. I mean, the Vikings could throw up 40 against this Packers defense if they get going in this game.
Yeah. I think the Packers can hold them down again. they just got to keep him out of the end zone. Like Greg Joseph could have 2-3 field goals today.
That's fine.
And that's the only way they win is if they keep them out of the end zone.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that. All right, let's move on to topic number 2. We're going to talk a little bit about the draft, where the Packers are currently. They're in the first round, and some players that may make sense to this Packers team. Looking ahead to the draft as we are in bowl season. So college football season is pretty much done. And Chad's got a good beat on what's going on right now. So we'll do that coming up next after a brief timeout. Don't forget, download Curd and Long on your Odyssey app or wherever you download your favorite podcast at. Streaming on the YouTube page for Odyssey Sports. Like, subscribe, ring that bell for notifications, all that fun stuff they tell you to do on these other podcasts. I try to do the same thing. Back after this. Hey, Sparky Fifer, 1250 AM The Fan, along with Chad Reuter of NFL.com, draft analyst. Follow him on Twitter at Chad_Reuter. You can follow me at Sparky Radio. Ryan Horvath off today. He'll be back next week as we talk about Packers-Vikings Sunday night football there in the first segment. Confident, concerned, and curious. Coming up in the next segment, the last segment of the show, we will get into our predictions. But right now, let's talk about the NFL draft. That is Chad's specialty, after all. And talk about this Packers football team going in. I will say that for majority of the year, I was at they better draft a tackle in the first round. I'm still at they better draft a tackle in the first round, but cornerback now has become a need that has kind of risen up the charts for me as we go further through this season. Obviously safety, but I don't want a safety in the first round. Yeah. Chad, your thoughts on where they sit in the first round and what might be around that area?
Well, I'm guessing that if they can get at least one win out of the next 2 weeks, they're really going to be kind of in the middle of the first round.
Sure.
Which means they probably won't be in a great position to get one of the elite tackles in the draft. Fashanu from Penn State, or Joe Alt from Notre Dame. So then you're looking at guys like Talise Fuaga from Oregon State, who's probably a right tackle only. And he's going to be picked probably in the middle of the first round somewhere. But it's just a matter of whether the Packers would want to move Zach Tom maybe over to left tackle, where he played at in Wake Forest, and he could potentially take that spot. So that's a possibility. But we know how the Packers love to draft defense in the first round, right? We know that. So the surprise pick that I'm saying now at the end of December is T'Vondre Sweat, nose tackle from Texas, in the middle of the first round. I'm telling you, if you're looking for a surprise pick, that's it. And the reason why I say that is because their run defense has not been good. And they could potentially lose Kenny Clark. He's coming into a contract year. So if that's a pick that, again, surprise pick, something to file away, they could really use a big guy like that. And if he comes out at the combine and works out anywhere close to what Jordan Davis did coming out of Georgia, he's going to be in that first round area. And that's the surprise pick that I think could happen that people aren't talking about right now.
A nose tackle. That is going to do absolutely nothing for me. I mean, that's great if that ends up being the pick. Fine. What about cornerback? Because there are some cornerbacks that'll probably be around that mid-first round area.
Yeah, you're looking at like a Nate Wiggins, maybe out of Clemson, real athletic guy. He's going to be similar to Eric Stokes in terms of he's more of an athlete than, an overall physical football player, which may not sit well with some people. Kamari Lassiter from Georgia is a guy that we're not sure if he's going to come out yet, but he's really kind of that physical guy that I like in the first round that I'm not sure is going to – we'll see what happens with Georgia and whether guys are going to all come back to try to run it again next year or not. But he's another guy. Kool-Aid McKinstry, depending on how high, a guy from Alabama is like a true cover guy. Again, if the Packers end up in the middle of the first round, they may not be able to land him. So it's really going to depend on what's going to happen in that middle of the first round in terms of what's available for corners. But there's going to be a little more value. Denzel Burke from Ohio State, if he decides to come out. So there's a little more opportunity there for a solid guy if they decide to go that way.
Packers multiple twos, Packers multiple threes. Where is the strength or strengths of this draft where they can really get some good value in the second and third round, even though we all know that Goody hasn't been great in the third round?
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at the secondary, right? I mean, that's like we've already talked about.
Safety.
You can get a safety, you can get a corner if they don't get it. And that's why I'm looking at other positions potentially in the first round, because you might be able to get a pretty solid corner in the second round. DJ James from Auburn, for example, in the third round. You know, Kyrie Jackson from Oregon, a lot of people aren't talking about him, former Alabama guy. He could be a third round pick that's got the size that you really want at that outside corner. So he may not be the fastest guy, but I think in the third, he's one of those guys. And then there's a bunch of safeties you can look at. Tyler Nubin from Minnesota. Look, the Packers could have taken Brian Branch last year, and they didn't.
Yep.
And I didn't understand it at the time. I still don't. But, you know, you're going to find some value in, you know, corner like that, like guy like Nubin, for example, in the middle. Bo Braid from Maryland's another guy that can kind of cover and is a physical player in that second, third round area. So you're really looking at the secondary and then the offensive line. Obviously, you got to do something about the offensive line. This is a solid tackle group this year. So if you can't find one in the first, you're going to be able to find one in the second. And really in the middle of the draft, you got to get a guard, center, something in the middle. You have to find that in the middle of this draft somewhere. They've taken some shots at it. It hasn't worked. But again, Zach Tom is he's an interesting guy because you can put him at center and he has experience at left tackle and he's done right at right tackle. So you can kind of see what you get in this draft and move him around appropriately. Elgin Jenkins, the same situation where you can move him around a little bit too. So you're probably going to be looking that direction on day 2.
What about the running back position? Because this is a position that I think is a big question mark for the Packers, right? What do they do with Jones' contract? What's he willing to play for? Does he want to stay? I think he does. Yeah. A.J. Dillon, I think, first half of the season where he's like, he's done. He's gone. He's not coming back. Then he had a burst, had a good few games. Last week, I don't think was all that great necessarily.
Right.
But as far as running back go, I would think this has to be a position addressed in this draft at some point too.
For sure. In the middle of the draft, I think you have to take a guy that you like. If they decide not to bring back A.J. Dillon, which I would understand, I didn't like the pick in the second round when it happened regardless, but
right.
You know, you're looking at a guy, you can find a really good back in the middle rounds this year, a guy who's playing today with Kentucky, Ray Davis, in the middle of third, fourth round. Audric Estime from Notre Dame is actually pretty similar to A.J. Dillon. So he's a guy I could see them, and Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin, another guy that if you want that power back in third, fourth round, he could be there for you. So I think early on day 2, late on day 1 would be that spot if there's a really good value for a running back. But unless Dillon takes a really friendly contract, because like you said, Aaron Jones are going to have to do something about that contract. And I think they will. I think they'll work that out. But I don't see Dillon returning unless he takes a very, very good deal. And then if he returns, then obviously they're going to look more later in the draft. And Emmanuel Wilson, hopefully he'll go today. I want to see. He's another guy I was curious about to see if he's going to play today and how does he look? Because you're taking running backs in the second, third round. You can get these guys as free agents that are pretty good. And he's going to be real. He's going to be. I hope he can play, and I hope he contributes because I really liked him out of Fort Valley State last year. So I'll be really curious about him too.
Here's Chad Reuter, NFL.com draft analyst, Steve Sparky Fifer with you. One other thing here before we get to our predictions in the next segment, the RAS score, the RAS score, the athletic score, they are very attached to high numbers for their players that they take in the draft. When you're doing your mock drafts, you do your first mock draft and you do a couple rounds and you eventually get to your 7-round mock draft. Do you take those numbers into effect when you put together your mock drafts for the Packers?
I mean, when I do the 7-round mock draft for everybody,
right,
and that's part of the equation. There's RAS score, and obviously combine results are the base of that, and the pro day results are based of that. Those are correlated to how good a guy really is in the grand scheme of things, right? It's really you're not going to pick a guy with a high RAS score that's a 5th round football player in the second round. You're not going to do that. But it is a nice tiebreaker in terms of guys that are kind of in that. Well, is he worth a late second or early third or late third? So you're kind of in that as a tiebreaker. I will look at those numbers to make sure. But in the end, if the guy's not a solid football player or a guy who's really worth it on film as a T2 guy, I'm not going to move a guy up because of his RAS score. It's really what you see on the field is a result of the athleticism that they show on testing. And if you test great and he's not playing well, then there's something off, and you really have to watch it, see what that is. So those are guys you pick later on day 3 to see if they become something. The Donald Driver who could jump out of the drill, wasn't the greatest receiver ever, jumps out of the gym. You take a chance on him in the 7th round to see if you can become something. But overall, it's a tiebreaker. It's something you look at, but it's just one factor in the process.
Follow Chad on Twitter at Chad_Reuter, Reuter. You can follow me at Sparky Radio. Take a quick time out, come back. We'll make our predictions. Packers-Vikings Sunday Night Football. Must win for both teams if they want to be playoff bound here in 2023, heading into 2024. We'll do that next. Hey, it's Sparky Fifer, 1250 AM of The Fan. Follow me on Twitter at Sparky Radio. He is Chad Reuter, filling in for Ryan Horvath today of NFL.com. He covers the NFL draft, senior analyst over there. And it's time now to make our predictions for this game coming up on Sunday Night Football. Chad, I think I feel comfortable in letting you go first in this one. Because, again, it's in Minneapolis. That's a great field. I think it's one of the best fields in the National Football League. They did a great job with it, regardless if you like the Vikings or not. You have to figure there will be a bunch of Packer fans. They're kind of balancing this out as far as Packers to Viking fan ratio. So it might be closer to a split, which would be good for Packer fans and the Packers if that were to be the case. And really, I don't know if it's it might be, that probably is the most pressurized game that Jordan Love has been in to this point, as far as a little bit more of the weight of the world on him coming into this game, knowing how crappy his defense and special teams are at this point, and knowing they have to win. So that's going to be another angle to this as far as how does Jordan Love handle this pressure for the first time in his career?
Yeah, I think, and the problem is that the Vikings run defense is actually pretty good. So you can't rely, you'll have to, if you give Jones or Dillon, whoever's on the field, Wilson on the field, if you give them 20 carries, they might only get 60, 65 yards. And it's going to be rough. And so it is going to fall on Love a little bit more. And not having not having Musgrave and not having Watson and all these guys that aren't in, it's going to be really difficult on him. He might have to run for 30 or 40 yards in this game. I'll be very interested to see if they finally kind of break out more of those bootlegs, more of the called quarterback runs in this game to really let him get the feel of this game. So my prediction, the Vikings are not good. They're not good. The Packers are only slightly better, I think. And I think it's going to come down to a field goal battle. And I think it's going to be like a 26-23 Packers victory, something like that, where it's just a bunch of field goals. Greg Joseph, the Vikings field goal kicker, has not made a field goal longer than 40 yards since like mid-October.
Hey, by the way, how about Mason Crosby, people? How about Mason Crosby from 52, his first field goal for the Giants? Wow, that was awesome. I was so happy for him.
The MVP of this game is going to be Carlson, I think. If they win this game, he's going to be the MVP of this game because he's going to make it work, and he's going to make enough. He might miss one, but he's going to make enough for them to pull out the victory.
He scares me every time he goes out there, even for extra points. I was like, well, we'll see if he makes it. I have literally no faith in this dude. I should have more faith than I do because he hasn't missed as many as I probably have made out in my brain this year. He's actually
look, when you let Crosby go, you expect that if they're going to let Crosby go, this guy's going to make 100% of everything, right? Because that's what you think is going to happen, but it's not. That's not the fact of the matter. I think he gets it indoors. I think he makes it work. It's going to be fun to see the Vikings if they could lose to Daniel Carlson's brother in the last game of the year. That's just a great storyline. I hope it happens. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I think the Vikings are going to score 40. And I think the Packers lose this game like 40-33 or something absolutely insane like that. It ends up becoming some type of track meet. Packers, tie the score at 33 or something like that, and Hall leads them down the field, and they end up getting a touchdown, and Hall ends up with like a 30-yard run somewhere on that drive to set up the touchdown, and heartbreak exists. And then Matt LaFleur goes up and says, Joe Barry, we got to score more points. We got to score more points. Because that crap last week, as far as, we just got to do a better job of, not going 1, 2, 3 out. We got to score more points for our defense. At times like that, it's like, man, your loyalty is unbelievable. I mean, it's crazy. And I brought this up on an earlier podcast. Mike McDaniel's in this league because of Matt LaFleur. The dude was out of the league, and Matt LaFleur was the one that stomped to get him onto a coaching staff and got him hired back into the NFL. One for Matt LaFleur, who knows where Mike McDaniel would be coaching right now? I mean, Matt LaFleur's loyalty is unquestioned.
It is, and that's why you have a strong GM, or that's why you have a team owner. When they didn't fire Barry after the Tampa Bay game, I wanted to say, tell me a team doesn't have an owner without telling me a team doesn't have an owner.
Yep.
Because if there was an owner, if there was a Jerry Jones or Spanos or somebody in charge of this team, Barry would have been gone immediately after the Tampa Bay game. If not, maybe last year, honestly. But that's not how the organization works. And LaFleur is taking it on, and that's his decision to do so until somebody tells him it's not. So that's the problem.
Is there a guy out there that you would like to see in Green Bay's defensive coordinator next year, providing they actually fire Joe Barry? Because, again, Jim Leonard was interviewed the last time. Yeah. He's sitting out there right now. He's not doing anything. The Badger guy, I'll tell you, I like Minter at Michigan. I would love that. He's a younger guy. Put him on that staff and let him figure it out and go from there. I think that would be the guy I would kind of like. I know there's people that like Zimmer, the old Vikings head coach and stuff. Yeah. I can't see LaFleur going down a bitter, crotchety old guy route to be defensive coordinator. I don't see it.
It's going to be interesting to see if Mark Murphy has anything to say about that hire or not. I mean, is he a figurehead president? Is he going to get involved in this decision? And Gutekunst as well. I mean, I really think it's going to be interesting. But you're right. I think a younger guy. I think Jimmy Leonard is the one most people would love to see. I think he's worked with some great people. I think he's got so much experience. He's been in the league. He gets it. I think that would be the hire that most people would like to see. But I don't study enough defensive coordinators to really, put out a unknown name or anything like that.
Let me come at you with this. Do you think they're best suited by staying in the 3-4 defense going forward, based on personnel and what they have?
I think most teams in the league are multiple fronts anyway right now. And so I think you want somebody who wants to take advantage of that wants to show as many possible looks as possible in their defense to throw teams off. And that there's a reason why teams are doing that, is that you don't want to just be able to see. I don't know if Preston Smith's going to be on this team next year or not. I mean, that's a big issue. But if they go to a more of multiple fronts, put his hand on the ground, put Sean Gary's hand on the ground sometimes, and let them get after the quarterback more and not worry about being in space as much.
Van Ness could put his hand on the ground too.
Yeah, exactly.
Another big guy.
Honestly, I think Van Ness should put his hand on the ground when they have a 3-man line more often. I think him as a 5 technique is kind of where I thought he would go anyway. But I think the point is, all these guys are athletic enough where you can move them around and do different things with them. And I think that's what their next guy is probably going to do, because that's really the way the league is. The league is positionless in a lot of ways now. And I think it's going to go more in that direction in the future.
He is Chad Reuter. He's the best. He's my guy. He is following him on Twitter at Chad_Reuter, NFL.com. And college bowl season upon us. Before you know it, the combine will be here. Pro day will be here. We're getting into the really, really busy time of the year for Chad Reuter.
All-star games on NFL Network,
Yes.
We're getting there, buddy.
Going to be real super busy. You will not see Chad anywhere close to anything other than maybe NFL Network TV, and that'll be about the extent of it. Chad, thank you so much for coming on, my friend. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sparky. Appreciate the invite.